Hello everyone, welcome to From the Star Wars Library, where Star Wars is in print, the Force is with the readers, and the lighting is still a little washed out, still in the gray shirt, still part of this series recorded at the same time as the previous episode you hopefully have taken the time to also just watch. My name is Nathan P. Butler, your host. This time we continue our coverage of the Marvel Pizzazz stories, Pizzazz, as I said, I guess, last time around. As you may recall, in the last episode I noted that Pizzazz was around from October of 1977 up till January of 1979. We've already taken a look at the story entitled The Keeper's World, which is also known many times these days as Star Wars No. 0, its reprint title, which ran all the way up until June of 1978. After that, Pizzazz went into a new serialized Star Wars story, often referred to either as Kingdom of Ice or War on Ice. Kingdom of Ice was the name of the first part. I've printed out the first page of the first part from a JPEG collection that I have here. So Kingdom of Ice, or War on Ice, which is what it was known as when it wound up seeing its latter chunk serialized in the pages of another Marvel publication. So War on Ice, Kingdom of Ice, same story. Now this story ran in the pages of Pizzazz 10 through 16. 16 was the last issue of Pizzazz. It was prematurely canceled. That meant that Kingdom of Ice, or War on Ice, was unfinished. Now, it wouldn't necessarily have fit into the mainstream Marvel series. So what did they do? Well, they had a series running in the UK of serialized stories entitled Star Wars Weekly. So Marvel UK, the UK, United Kingdom variant of Marvel, that branch of the company, went ahead and put these stories out in the pages of Star Wars Weekly. Those who were curious about Star Wars Weekly, by the way, can check out a spread of some of the covers from Star Wars Weekly over in the UK inside the pages of the first Marvel Annual. So the story was a little bit odd. The first parts ran in Pizzazz 10 through 16. Then the parts from 10, 11, and 12, called The Kingdom of Ice, The Snow Demons, and Treachery, were then collected in the pages of Star Wars Weekly in the UK, number 57. The next two parts, 13 and 14 of Pizzazz, Death Trap, and Snow Fury, showed up as Kingdom of Ice Part 2 in Marvel UK Star Wars Weekly, number 58. Then Star Wars Weekly number 59 included The Ice Worm Cometh and Showdown, the two parts from Pizzazz numbers 15 and 16. Then we got the next part entitled Pursuit in the pages of Star Wars Weekly number 60, but only in the UK. Eventually, though, the story was finally released and finished for American audiences in the pages of Marvel Illustrated Books number 1. This was released by Marvel in 1981. And you notice that while this serialized page is actually rather big, quite a few panels on a page, you can't quite get that much in this book, so instead the panels are reorganized. But it is the same material finally finishing out that story. The general gist of the story is that Luke and Leia are on their way to Akuria 2. While they were on their way, they wound up being diverted to the Keeper's World, as we saw in the previous serial, thanks to the fact that R2-D2 wasn't quite fixed just right after the Battle of Yavin, and he didn't interface right with the Nava computer or whatever. It threw him out of hyperspace a little bit early. They ran into some Imperials, had to escape. The escape had them crashing on the Keeper's World. Now their ship is fixed. They left the Keeper's World. They finally make their way to the frozen Akuria 2, which frankly looks a heck of a lot like Hoth. It's an ice world well before we saw Hoth in The Empire Strikes Back in 1980. This is the middle of 1978 when this serial begins. They wind up landing on the world and trying to find the local rebel base, which is essentially sort of a traveling base at this point, a war sled type of base here. They wind up running into some of the natives, these native creatures that are quasi-sentient, but really resemble wampas, known as snow demons. Gotta wonder if Lucas was perhaps looking at this for any kind of inspiration. In any event, they wind up with what they think is the rebel leader, at least Luke and Leia do. R2 and C-3PO wind up being diverted by being captured by the snow demons. And it turns out that the guy that they think is the rebel leader is actually an Imperial. He had stolen the vehicle and defeated the rebel leader previously. The rebel leader winds up being the one who's working with the snow demons, so he gets his hands on R2-D2 and C-3PO, and then it's a matter of trying to save Luke and Leia when the Imperial finally reveals his true nature and turns on them. The battle ensues until eventually all is well, the Imperials are defeated, and our heroes can then take off for new adventures, which would not be continued in the pages of Pizzazz because it croaked. One particular thing to notice about this is that when it was reprinted for American audiences, what we got was pages 142 up through page, 158 here, the end of Marvel Illustrated Books Star Wars #1. That's not the entire story. If you were reading this, you would have to have already read all the stuff printed in Pizzazz. This was just a continuation of it, jumping from one medium to another, but it says nothing in here about it, at least not anything in any kind of detail. So it's an odd story. You sort of pick up in media res, in the middle of things, in this, if you hadn't already read Pizzazz. It says Pizzazz is now tough to come by, certainly tougher than these are to come by, though these are still somewhat tough to come by. It means that most modern readers who want to try to read this story won't be able to read the entire thing. It's just sort of the nature of the beast with this particular publication. The good news, though, comes in our big questions. What would we always ask, right? Is this essential, and is it able to be skipped? Again, is it essential? Absolutely not. Neither was Keeper's World, and this one is even less necessary than Keeper's World because all it does is tell what happens to Luke and Leia afterwards. It doesn't set up anything for anything else. Is it something that you could skip? Absolutely. It's not only not essential, it's not really something that really needs to be read. But again, very much like what we saw with the Keeper's World, it handles the serialization process much better than pretty much any other Star Wars serialized tales. Whether we're talking about the newspaper strips that tend to repeat information quite a bit, or if we're talking about the somewhat jumbled mess of the serialization of the Old Republic webcomics that eventually became the Old Republic comic book series. So it's not a bad story, Kingdom of Ice. It's just not something that we need to read. It's just another oddball part of Star Wars history from a publication that was canceled in the middle of a Star Wars story. It's not the last time that'll happen. I'm looking at you, Star Wars gamer, but we'll check out those stories when we eventually do come to them. So, as always, thank you very much for watching. This has been From the Star Wars Library, and may the Force be with the readers.